Hello, everyone. Good morning. Great to see all of you here. This is fantastic. A full house. Wow. I'm Anita Contini, and I manage our arts portfolio at Bloomberg Philanthropies and our arts team. And before I begin, I just want to call out the wonderful Lindsay Boyd, who you've probably been pen pals with. There she is. Raise your hands, Lindsay. Please keep reaching out to Lindsay. Lindsay was very crucial in the process of getting everything ready for you here and to get your checks to you. So that's really important. But on behalf of our chairman, Michael Bloomberg, and our CEO, Patty Harris, we are so thrilled to be here in Denver for this very first Bloomberg Philanthropies DeVos Institute Denver Management Seminar. It is fabulous. We're very, very supportive of small and mid-sized arts organizations. You probably are aware of why we do this, specifically because it's important, because that's what builds community. And these organizations often get overlooked in cities, and most of the funds and efforts go to sometimes larger institutions, and the smaller institutions are not only feeders, but that's where the talent really begins. And so we're really thrilled to be part of this. Just a little about myself, because I'm not sure how many of you know, but I used to run a small arts organization a number of years ago. It was called Creative Time. I founded it back in the late 70s. Its mission was to support artists' ideas with very ambitious public art projects, and they presented it in unused spaces around the city of New York. It didn't own any space, it just supported ideas, and it still exists today. However, when I began, its operating budget for the first year was $8,000. You probably all can remember those days. And even though we are all very passionate about the work that we do and supporting artists, it sometimes takes a long time to really build up support and enthusiasm for our organizations. But by the time I left Creative Time, I was there about 10 years, the organization's operating budget grew to about $500,000. And now, 40 years later, the organization's operating budget today is $3.6 million. So you can say it was a slow and very managed and steady growth. But the most important thing is it's about the programs, and they do great programs the same way you all do. So I only wish that I could say to Michael that, why weren't you around when I started Creative Time? I could have used all those management skills then. But today is the beginning of some wonderful things for you. It's going to be very pivotal and reporting experience over the next few years. This DeVos seminar, the cycle in artistic planning, is actually the foundation of all the seminars that are to come. And you're going to learn many tools and very smart ideas that will help you manage and sustain your organization. Just to give you a little notice about how Michael Bloomberg thinks, is that we manage and evaluate every single one of our programs across all of the 5 different areas of the foundation. And we do this because we learned so much from doing that, from the grantees, what has worked, what has not worked, and we take that learning and put it into the next series of programs. So because of that, Michael Bloomberg often says, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And we hear that a lot from him. And yes, we're going to manage and also evaluate this particular program. But I thought it'd be good to share with you quickly just a few of the takeaways from the last AIM program, which was in 6 cities. It supported about 260 arts organizations across those cities. One of the things we learned was that over 69% of the grantees actually increased their program planning time from just a few months to, by the end of the program, to 3 to 5 years, which really made a change in how they operate today. And Michael's going to take you through some of that. We also learned that 70% increased board contributions and engagement. And that was really important because so many of them didn't have a give or get policy, or didn't know how to engage their board to really help them in their communities. We also saw that 76% of the grantees actually increased their total contributed contributions. That's not only from corporations and foundations, but from individuals, which I think is really important, and it's an area that sometimes is often missed. But one of my favorite things that we learned was that 100% of the organizations commented over and over again how much they actually learned from each other. So many of them didn't even know each other in their own community. Sometimes you hear about someone, but you don't really know them. And we hope that this program will help you the way it helped the other organizations to get to know your colleagues, because there's so much you can learn. You can start partnerships and collaborations, and the opportunity to get to know each other is really where it's all about. But before I close, I just want to once again say thanks to Lindsay for everything that she's done. And again, yes, please reach out to her with any questions. You're going to see a lot of her, so we're thrilled about that. We're going to miss you in the office, though. So I also want to thank all the board members that are here. It's amazing that you're all here today. There's so many board members, so thank you to the board members. Please, you are welcome at every single one of these sessions, and please get other board members if you can't get here to get other ones to come, because it's important for you to know what your institutions are learning. I also want to thank Gina Ferrari, who is from Bone Phillips Stanton Foundation. What a leadership foundation here in the city. We love them. We've been working with them on a number of different other activities through Art Place America or Americans for the Arts, and they are just totally fantastic, and you're very fortunate to have Gina and Gary here to support you. I know that Ginger White will be here later, so you'll see her. She's coming in. But before right now, I really want to just say thank you to the DeVos Institute. We have been working with the DeVos Institute since 2011. And the success that the arts organizations have gained from them has really been amazing. I want to thank today to Tanya Surtees, Maria Grossman, and Victoria's here. And so I want to thank her too, and because they do everything to get this ready today. And also, you're going to be meeting Brett Egan, who is the president of the DeVos Institute. You'll meet him in the second seminar. It's pretty amazing. But now, it's really wonderful for me to say, Michael Kaiser, the chairman of the DeVos Institute, is here, and you are about to have a most amazing, wonderful morning. So for no further delay, I want you to start hearing what Michael has to share with you. So thank you very much, and we're very proud of all of you.
Good morning. It's really great for us to be here in Denver. For us, this always feels like the first day of school, for lots of reasons, but the real reason is because over these next couple of years, we're really going to get to know you very, very well and your organizations. This is not a program where we come and speak, and then you go off, and then a few months later we come and speak again. This is a program where we really work together, and where our goal is to make your lives easier. That's the only goal of this program from our perspective, is just to make your lives easier. And so we will, over this coming months, not just come and give classes, but you're going to have mentors who are going to talk to you monthly, and we're going to have site visits and all kinds of activities together so that we can provide whatever support you find useful for us to give you over these next 2 years. We are extremely grateful to our friends from Bloomberg Philanthropies, and let me single out Anita, who just spoke, because AIM is really Anita's program. She's been with it since day one. She keeps it alive, and without her, this program wouldn't exist. And we've now, I think, before this cohort in the 7 cities, I believe we worked with over 500 organizations, and it's all because of Anita and her time and effort. So thank you, Anita, for all you do for the arts writ large in America. There's only one rule of this morning, which is if you have a question, ask it. Okay, this is not a lecture. I've got lots of stuff I want to talk about, but really this is a two-way street. This entire program is a two-way street. If something makes sense to you, you can say it if you want. If something really doesn't make sense to you, you think it's wrong for your organization, speak up. There's a lot of learning in that. And just if you're confused, we really don't want anyone to go off saying, I didn't really get that. That really kills us. So just let's have a conversation. Raise your hand just because it's easier for me to see, and also because we will get you a microphone. We record this. We record this for exactly one reason, because we put it online for you to use. If you want to go back, if there's someone in your organization who's not here today, but you feel they should listen to a section, we're going to send to you in the next couple of weeks a link to a portal that's just for you all, and no one else in the world sees it. So don't worry that what you say is going to be broadcast. That's not true. We don't tweet about this. But what it does mean is that you have access to it again, okay? So that's why we film, and that's why we want to hear your voices, because we will not get a good reading of your voice if you speak without the microphone. I can hear it, we can hear it, the camera can't hear it. So do raise your hand. That's the only reason why. Other than that, let's just have a conversation. And I wanted to start, and this is going to be on you more than on me. I'm very lucky that I get to teach arts management literally all over the world. I think at this point we've had about 8 people from 87 countries in our programs. In many cases in countries, in many cases they come to us in the United States. The one thing that is common for every single person I meet is that it's really hard to run an arts organization. It's hard to be on the board, it's hard to be an artistic director, it's hard to be an executive director, it's hard to do the marketing and the fundraising. It's wonderful and it's enriching and it's challenging and it's great, but it's also difficult. And I'd like to start by hearing from you, what do you think makes it challenging to be on the board or be on the staff of an arts organization today? It could be Denver related or it could be more general than that. Anybody? You're going to have to talk, otherwise it's going to be a really boring morning. Yes.
Intersectionality of the arts. So
can you just say that one more time?
Yeah,
I'm
so I
sorry.
think one of the things that makes it difficult, I'm Jamie Duffy with Youth on Record. I think often our funding community, not the Bonfils Stanton Foundation, who's here, and I really mean that about them, but a lot of our funders, from foundations to government funders to individual donors, have a hard time understanding the intersectionality of the arts, that arts don't just exist for their own sake, but that they exist to address the most pressing issues of our time. So we often find many funders say, well, how can you be in youth development and education and housing and the arts?
Right.
And so we often get, turned down for arts funding, basically because the programs are too intersectional. I don't know. So I imagine most of the people in this room are feeling that too.
I think it's a great point. Thank you. We're going to talk about a concept later this morning called institutional marketing. I believe in many instances the arts do it to themselves, because I don't think we educate people enough about what we do and who we are. And we have to find engaging and wonderful and thrilling ways to do that. And that's probably the focus of my whole career, because I think there's so much we do in our communities. And I think in many cases we only place a spotlight on one thing we do, or in many cases we're just not really clear. And sometimes we use language that people don't understand. And I think we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how do we engage funders, students, audience members, visitors, whatever kind of organization you have, to really want to participate. How do we get them to feel like their life is really going to be enriched by participation? And I'm not sure we do as good a job in this field as we need to. We do amazing things. I'm just not sure we talk about it in the right way. So thank you for that, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. Others? Yes, sir.
Michael, Phil Cernanek with Stories on Stage. I'm a board member that's still in his diapers. But one of the things that I would say is also a challenge, and I think it relates to some of your comments, is the fact that we start off as amateurs. Maybe our performers may be professionals, but as far as board members and to some extent some of our directors start out as amateurs with limited experience in the broader side of what it takes to be an organization and a successful organization. And we may bring passion to the table, but not necessarily professional expertise.
I personally think that's the biggest challenge facing the arts today. It's not a shortage of great painters or dancers or videographers. It's a shortage of trained individuals who know truly what's important in making a cultural institution work. And I think that we have too much conventional wisdom, like all we need is an endowment is one of my favorites. Or we need younger audience members. That's what's going to do it for us. Or we need more social media, which is great. All of these things are great. I love endowments. I love younger audiences. I love social media. But it has to be in the context of a story we're telling. It can't just be, if we get an endowment, all of a sudden the world's fine. So I think you're right. I think there's a lot of training to be done. And frankly, that's the purpose of this program, is to start to shed away some of the conventional wisdom, and let's talk about really what makes health. And this morning's session is totally devoted to that one topic. And then it's a question of how do we disseminate it to others. And that's why I do go around the world trying to talk about this stuff. Yes, Kim. And you can start before the mic comes, and then they'll catch up.
Hi, I'm Kim Estes McCarty from Platform. I think the fact that particularly small nonprofits, we have to rely on unreliable funding sources. I mean, I feel like I'm always playing catch up. Just last year I had one that just closed their office in Denver. They changed their priorities, and it's stuff that's completely out of your control. And so you end up trying to play catch up just to replace that funding instead of growing your funding.
Right? I always said I wanted to have a day where everyone gets together in a football stadium and we have like Primal Scream Day, right? And donors who just disappear suddenly, that would be like one where we'd all go, ah! We're going to talk this morning about a concept that we call family. And what I'm going to say, a lot of what I say sounds mean, and I don't mean it to be mean. I mean it to be supportive. I think 95% of the organizations I work with have families that are too small. The family are the people around you who actually care about you. I'm not talking about your internal family. Those are family too. I'm not talking about your artists or your staff. I'm not talking about the people who are in the organization. I'm talking about the people just the next level, board members who have no obligation to be board members, volunteers, audience members, students, depending on the kind of organization you are, funders. That's how I'm going to use the word family. And most of us have families that are like this. And if there's one thing I can teach you over 2 years, it's how to get the family from like this to like that and to keep it growing. When Anita tells you the great story of Creative Time, which is truly one of the great arts organizations in New York and in America, and how it grew, they have a family. They've done so many smart things that year by year by year, not steadily, it doesn't happen like in a straight line, but over time, that family has grown and grown and grown and grown. This is something that we have to learn to do. And everything we talk about today is going to be about how do you get more people to care about you and to care about you more so that the funding base grows, and if someone drops out, it's a little less painful, but also when you hit a recession, that you're the last to be cut, not the first. And how do you start to build this cadre of people who truly care about you and feel their personal happiness is wrapped up in your success? This, to me, is one of the critical concepts that we teach, and there's lots of, Anita talked about expanding artistic planning time, which we're going to talk about this morning, in the second part of this morning. To us, that's one of the key tools for building your family. Why? Because if you're only fundraising for what's happening in the next 3 months, you're going to have to go back to everyone you already know. right? If you only have a few months to fund this project, you don't have time to cultivate and meet and research and do all the kinds of things we want to do to build our family. You're going to go back to the same 5 donors you always go to. And at some point, they get tired. And I don't believe in the term donor fatigue. I think it's donor boredom. But they get bored with us. But I do believe that we sometimes don't give ourselves the breadth of time to cultivate new donors who could care about us, new family members, and so we can really start to build the people we can go to. And the way you build your funding base, in part, is getting people who you know to give you a little bit more, but that's not the safe way to do it, because over time one of them drops out and you have that hole. So we're going to talk a lot about that over these next 2 years, I promise. It's one of my major primal screams. Yes?
Ilana Steinberg, Board President of Denver Children's Choir. Listening to some of the comments and things have been gelling in my head. One of the things I think is really challenging is that you talked about how we are the first to get cut and not the last. I think that, and I know I feel this myself, I think it feels hard to justify how great we are as arts organizations because we're not hospitals. Right. We're not feeding the hungry, housing
right.
Directly housing the homeless, right? And it always feels like a challenge to put yourself up against the people who are in the direct line of service of saving lives, and how we boost ourselves internally and then externally also to say, it, like you said before, it's not just art is great because it's fun and it's beautiful and it makes us feel good. That to really empower ourselves to feel the strength of the mission of what we're doing and how it benefits society.
I feel your pain. And children's choirs and children's organizations have special problems of aging out, right, which affects your donor base and those who care about you. And I've done a lot of work with children's organizations. But the truth is, just walk around downtown Denver. There's a ton of money in this city. There really is. Absolutely, we need our hospitals to be first rate, and we need our schools to be first rate, and we need our homeless shelters to be there and available and first rate. We need all that to make a great society. I'm not for the arts against homeless shelters, but I promise you there's enough money in this city for all of you. And the problem is there's a ton of people who are giving nothing to nobody. And the reason why there are a ton of people who are giving nothing to nobody, from my perspective, is not because they're evil or mean or anything. It's because we haven't done a great job of reaching out to them. So I take responsibility, and you should know I've spent most of my life running arts organizations, so I've been exactly where you are, but I take that responsibility. I don't think it's that society doesn't like us, it's that I failed. And I think we have to find a way to get people to say, this is so cool, this is so important. This is so important for a healthy portfolio. A society is a portfolio. It has lots of pieces. It has homeless shelters, but it also needs culture, and it needs creativity, and it also needs education and healthcare. It needs all kinds of things. And we present and we create one really important part of that portfolio. We have to find a way to get some more people to come into the mix. And I think one of the reasons why we failed in a lot of instances doing this is because we expect too large a gift. And because we have these wonderful foundations, and I love my foundations in the room, so please, this is not aimed at you at all, but our foundations give us these huge gifts, right? And probably the first time you get a gift from an individual, they're not going to give you that huge gift that you get from a wonderful foundation. But somehow we feel like we need this huge amount of money, so we're looking for these huge gifts. I'm going to talk a lot today about an organization I used to run called the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, great African-American dance company in New York City. And when I got to Alvin Ailey, the company was sort of like an hour from bankruptcy. This is in 1991. Alvin had passed away the year before. We had nothing. And everyone on the board, even in my interviews, said to me, go ask Bill Cosby for $1 million. Go ask Bill Cosby for $1 million. Now, that was when Bill Cosby was still Bill Cosby, you know. And He wasn't going to give us $1 million, not because he didn't like the Ailey Company, he did, and he was generous, but no one else was giving anything near that. My board members, half my board of 36, so 18 board members combined, were giving us $5,000. Our budget was $6.5 million. Okay, so Bill Cosby saw that. He wasn't going to give us $1 million when another board member was giving $300. But something more insidious was going on. Because every time they said, ask Bill Cosby for $1 million, and believe me, it was at every board meeting, at every thing. Every time they said, ask Bill Cosby for the $1 million, what everyone around their table was hearing was, we need a $1 million giver. And what every board member was thinking was, I don't know anyone I can ask for $1 million. That's not my social circle. So nobody got anything. Nobody raised any money because they felt they weren't going to be helpful unless they could find that $1 million gift. So I realized this was going on, so I stopped the Bill Cosby conversation, and I started a conversation with every board member saying, what amount are you comfortable asking for? Just what amount would you know people to ask for? And they decided, and this is not a prescription for you, this was just for them at that time, they said they could ask for $1,000. That was the amount they could ask for. So we created a whole program around asking for $1,000. And within 6 weeks, we had 600 people give us $1,000. That was $600,000. Now, it wasn't Bill Cosby's million, but it was pretty close. And I think we have to be thinking about who do we know, who's in our community, what can we ask for, how do we build our family, what amount's the right ask. It builds over time, it really does. In 1991, Alvin Ailey raised $1.7 million. To this year, I think the number's closer to $18 million. It grows, it grows, it grows. So we have to put ourselves on a track of pulling more people in, person by person. Again, we're going to have a whole fundraising session together. That's like 3 sessions from now. So it'll be a whole day on fundraising. But we're going to talk about it this morning as well. But do you see what I'm saying? I think we have to not feel like we're competing for the gift. I think what we have to think is we have to find who has any kind of interest in what we do and how do we build that cadre. And I don't think we do it well enough. And I don't think we capture the names well enough. And I don't think we do one-on-one cultivation well enough. And there's a lot of work to be done there. Yes, someone's got a mic? Oh, there, hi.
Hi, I'm Jen Olson. I'm the ED of Think 360 Arts for Learning. So here's something that probably everyone in this room can relate to. We are small organizations with small powerhouse staff, and everybody works really hard, but still it sort of puts us in a position where we're constantly prioritizing the operations of what we're doing over external things like marketing, and even things like fundraising. So I think that's definitely one of the challenges for organizations our size.
It is so hard, isn't it? And by the way, I then talk to organizations that have 15 staff members, and they say, oh, it's so hard because we have so few staff. And I work with one organization that has 200 staff members, and they say, oh, we're so understaffed. But you're right, because I always say that not-for-profits grow to the point that it's uncomfortable, because we have so much ambition. Our missions are so wonderful and far-reaching and idealistic that no matter what we have, we want to do more. And so you're going to get another staff person, all of a sudden they're sucked in, and now we need another and another and another. And all that says to me is we've got to prioritize really well, right? We have to make sure we're doing the exact right things because we can't waste an hour. We can't waste $1. I think waste is like, it's not a 4-letter word, but it's like a 4-letter word to me in the arts because it's so hard to raise that dollar, we don't want to waste it. And so we have to make sure we're doing the right things, and that's part of what we're going to talk about this morning, okay? Because I think a lot of times we do focus on the wrong thing. I'll give you a funny example of this. I used to run the Kennedy Center in Washington, and shortly after I arrived, I made a deal with the Royal Shakespeare Company to come every year for 5 years to the Kennedy Center. And the Prince of Wales Foundation was very generous and agreed to underwrite a big chunk of the cost of doing this. And just before I started the Kennedy Center and this project started, a new company was hired to make our programs, our little playbill programs. And so, I was running around trying to raise money and do all kinds of interesting stuff. And what I didn't do a lot of, which I probably should do more in my life, is proofreading. And so in the program for As You Like It, the first time the Royal Shakespeare Company was new residents at the Kennedy Center, it was not funded by the Prince of Wales Foundation, it was funded by the Prince of Wales Foundation. Now, you can say, shame on me. Yeah, it is shame on me. But you know what? I have to tell you, I would probably do the same thing again. In the sense that it didn't cost us anything, really. We had to apologize and change the programs. But we have to figure out where we really need to spend our time and where we need to spend a little less time. And it's not that I'm saying proofreading is a bad thing. I don't ever want to send out anything with errors. But I want to make sure that I'm really focusing on the key stuff. Otherwise, I really think we can end up having been perfect in the minute, but never moving forward. And that's what I'm worrying about. I want to talk about two problems in the arts that I see affecting many of us that I think we need to think about. And the first one is that we in the arts have a very hard time. This is not true for every organization here because you're so broad and diverse in terms of what you do, which is great. But we have a really hard time improving worker productivity. What do I mean by that? If you read the newspaper, in fact, there's a big story today about worker productivity in America. Workers tend to get more productive. If you're making steel or banking or whatever, we find ways so that each worker gets a little bit more productive year by year by year. And so what that means is we mitigate the cost of inflation a bit, because if workers are producing more, then we don't need as many new workers as we grow, so our costs don't go up as high. Worker productivity is one of the key economic measures we look at when we look at the health of an economy. We in the arts don't improve worker productivity real well. Where's my friends from, someone's here from Cleo Parker Robinson. Hi, how are you? Oh, hey, how are you? Good to see you again. Last time I saw you, I was on a stage with you. Okay, name me one of your favorite works that your company does. Rain Dance. How many people are in it this year? All right, and if you do it next year, how many people are in it? And the year after? 12. They're not getting any more productive. And how long a work is it? About how many minutes? How many? 20 minutes? Yeah. So next year, how long will it be? You're not dancing it faster every year? Shame on you. See, we don't really improve worker productivity that much in the arts. That's the nature of our funny business. We need to understand that. We need our funders to understand it. We need our board members to understand that. Because what it means is that our expenses go up pretty fast. We feel that when we do our annual budgets, and all of a sudden things are costing more and things are costing more. Whereas if you were in a lot of other industries, the expenses would go up like this. We tend to see our expenses go up really fast. That's one big problem we face. But there's a second problem that makes it even harder. And this particularly relates to any organization that has a physical space, meaning if you work in a theater or you work in a studio or you work in a gallery, and I know many of you do and some of you don't. But once we build that space, the real earned income potential is bounded. Opera Colorado's here. Yeah, there. Hi. What theater do you perform in? Which theater? How many seats? 2,100. How many seats next year? 2,100. Yeah. See, it doesn't go up. This is not like Coca-Cola that can reach more and more people. Once you fill your theater, it's filled. Once you fill your classroom, it's filled. Your real earned income, by real I mean not inflated, so not with price increases, our real earned income sort of stays flat. The most we can take in is flat. So we have expenses that go up real fast, and we have earned income that we hit a peak, and then we're sort of stuck. And so what we have year in and year out is a growing problem. I took Alvin Ailey to perform at the Herod Atticus, which is a beautiful, beautiful Roman amphitheater that was built by the Romans in the base of the Acropolis in Athens, Greece. If you're ever in Athens, go to performance at the Herod Atticus. I promise you, it doesn't matter what it is, you'll love it. Because you sit outside on these ancient stone bleachers, and the artists are on the stage, and the moon's up above you, and the Parthenon is right behind you, and you see it all lit up. It's the most beautiful theater I've ever seen. And my dancers were so excited because they were on this stage, and they were dancing and seeing this beautiful vista. And all I could think about was those same number of stone bleachers for 2,000 years. No opportunity for increasing earned income. That's a problem we face in the arts. We don't explain that, I don't think, well enough to our board members. I don't think a lot of them understand this challenge. If you think it's harder to run your arts organization now than 10 years ago, you're right, it is. We've had expenses continuing to go up. So what are the things we do to fill this gap between expense and earned income? What are the things we do? We don't need microphones for this, just call them out. We can expand locations. That only works if expanding locations actually earns us net per location, right? A lot of dance schools that works for. Doesn't necessarily work for a lot of other organizations which lose on each location, so expanding, it just means it gets serious. But that's one thing we can do, absolutely. What else? More performance, as long as you're making money per performance, right? And as long as you have audience, so that you're not expanding performances without an audience to cover it so that you end up not earning net money. That's another way of filling it. What else, Greg? Raising ticket prices. That's been the favorite approach of the arts in America. In 1960, the Metropolitan Opera in New York City, center orchestra seat, prime orchestra seat at the Metropolitan Opera in 1960. How much did it cost? Anyone? $10. Okay. What is it now? $300. That's a factor of 30, right? How much is inflation? What factor is inflation in that same period? 7.5 times. Metropolitan Opera ticket prices have gone up 4 times the rate of inflation. What does that mean? Well, you want to build your earned income by raising your ticket prices. You want to move it up. The only problem is, it's not a surprise that 20 years ago, the Metropolitan Opera sold 96% of their seats, and last year was 61% of their seats. Because we're disenfranchising. A lot of the people who you're worried about, who maybe don't value the arts, Ilana, in a way we've also done it to ourselves. We've priced people out. There's so many other forms of entertainment, there's so many other ways to inspire yourself these days, and people are saying, I can't afford that, it's just not part of my life. And people used to have a habit of going to the opera or the symphony or a museum or a class, now feel they can't afford it, so they go much less, if at all. And we end up having sort of killed ourselves by trying to do this too much. And then when you look at our missions, and so many of our missions deal with engaging new audiences or underserved audiences or people who maybe can't afford, when we do this, we're basically saying, our mission says this, but our pricing says that, and they're not synonymous. Yeah, Michael.
What about selling merchandise? We're sort of have this brand idea, and can that kill it too if you're trying to be a master, a jack of all trades?
So the question, Michael asked a great question about, what about merchandise? It works if there's real demand. But what I found is so many of us who think we're going to sell merchandise end up spending more time and money making it than we actually get to get it in. And the people who buy the merchandise think that's their annual gift. Or then my biggest no-no, please, 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 to your donors, they do not need mugs, umbrellas, hats, or t-shirts. There is no one who wants another mug. There's not one human being who wants another mug. And the amount of money it costs to go to the post office and stick that darn mug into that little thing and post it off, and it ends up breaking half the time anyway, and then you got to get another mug, and then they're mad at you, they gave a gift, You're thanking with a stupid mug they don't really want, but they're mad because it was broken. It's just like nonsensical. Give people experiences. Give them a rehearsal. Let them have an experience that you have every day by walking backstage or watching an exhibition being hung or watching an artist create something. This is what gets people excited, not the mug. But back to that. You can make money on merchandise sometimes, but it's so few. And to be honest, the smaller the organization, typically the less they're going to make on that mug or whatever merchandise. I mentioned I ran Alvin Ailey. I got there in 1991. They made a great video, one of the great dance videos of all time in 1971. It was Revelations Cry, and I forget what the third piece was, but it was with the greatest cast, Judith Jamison doing Cry and all this stuff. And when I got there in 1991 was the year they broke even on the video they made in 1971. So just be careful. You know, it's not usually our expertise. You know, and I would rather stick with what we know and do it really well than try and say we're going to make money on the t-shirt or we're going to make money on whatever the thing is we're going to sell. So it's not a bad idea, but just really study it to make sure there's real money to be made there. The other thing that we're not talking about, no one's mentioned, is fundraising. That helps fill this gap, right? So we have to figure out a way to raise enough to balance it with modest ticket prices increases where it's doable. With other ventures, it might be a merchandise, it could be rental of our facility, it could be food service and what we do. There's all kinds of ways to help fill this gap. But I want to talk about our approach to doing that. And that's this concept that we call the cycle. And it's at the heart of what we believe. It's pretty basic. Most people here said, yeah, I knew that. But then it's a question of actually implementing it. So let me talk through this cycle. We gave you all, each organization, a copy of a book we wrote called The Cycle. So please feel free to read that, which goes into more depth. But over the 2 years, you're going to get to all of that stuff. Also, we have created a MOOC, an online course called The Cycle, which you can take for free. It's on Coursera. So if you or someone else wants to study the cycle, feel free to do that. And again, you can always go back to the videos that are going to be in the portal. But let me talk about what we find to be what makes health. If there's one thing, if you could only pick one thing that makes an arts organization healthy, what do you think I would think it was? Say it. Exactly. Thank you, Garrett. It's art. People always think I'm going to say it's control of finances, because I look like an accountant, but it's art, and I'm going to use another word here, programming, okay? Because some of you don't actually make art, but you teach, or you have some new technology you're bringing to the arts, or whatever. It's programming. It's exciting, dynamic, wonderful, rich programming. And I'm going to say that I find most arts organizations don't spend enough time thinking through what's going to make their programming really amazing, really amazing. In many cases, it's semi-amazing. But I think if there's one thing we can do to make arts organizations healthy, it's to create amazing art. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the morning. I wish that were enough, but it's not. I wish it were enough, but it's not, because otherwise our lives would be too easy. We have to let people know about this art. We have to market the art. And I break marketing into two pieces. One piece I call programmatic marketing. And by programmatic marketing, I'm talking about the marketing we do to get people to come to our thing. It could be coming to our performance, it could be coming to our exhibition, it could be coming to our class. It's to get people to actually participate with us. There's so much written and talked about programmatic marketing, and we're going to talk a lot about it in our next session with you. But I'm obsessed with something I call institutional marketing. I mentioned it before. Institutional marketing is not about getting people to come to next performance of Hamlet. It's to get people to say, I think Cherry Creek Theater Company is the most astonishing place. I got to be part of it. It's different. And I want to give you an example of good institutional marketing to give you a sense of what I mean by this. And I'm going to go back to my Ailey days. When I got to Ailey, we were essentially bankrupt. And the company was going to close. And my board, when they interviewed me, and the dancers and the staff were saying, we're so famous, we're Alvin Ailey. How can we be so poor? Why don't we have more money? Everyone knows us. Everyone loves us. And then, I'm sorry that light's right in your eyes. Are you okay? I hope not. I think it's going down the line, though. So get ready, you guys. So they said we were so famous. And then a few months after I got to Ailey, the author Alex Haley died. You know Alex Haley is the author of the book Roots. And we got thousands of letters of condolence because people thought Alex Haley was Alvin Ailey. And that told me we were not quite as famous as we thought we were. And that said, people thought we wrote Roots at the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater. And this is not great. So I put in place a 1-year institutional marketing effort. It was not aimed at getting people to buy tickets to next performance. It was aimed at getting people to know that we didn't write Roots. And I want to go through it with you, not because you're going to copy it, although some of the ideas you might like, but I want to go through it to give you a sense of what I mean by a comprehensive institutional marketing campaign, which I believe every arts organization needs to do. And by the way, the smaller the organization, the more it needs it. The biggest organizations in town sort of have it. They still need to be vibrant, but the smaller the organization, the more important this concept is. So let me go through it. And it started in December of 1992, excuse me, when we did the Phil Donahue show. Now, a lot of you are really young, but he was the person before Oprah, okay? Pretty soon people won't know who Oprah is, but at least I've got a few more years of teaching. We got a whole hour on his show. How did we do that? We did that because I'm obsessive about knowing who's in my audience. I treat my audience like family. I don't just say, thanks for buying a ticket. I don't give speeches from the stage. I don't like those. I stand on the steps of every performance and talk to people as they walk in. And I get to know who they are, and they get to know me. I don't get to talk to everyone in the audience every night, but I start over time to really get to know them. And I found out that one of the nice ladies in my audience was a producer for the Donahue show. Well, that sends off, all kinds of fireworks. This is a person who produces the Donahue show. How cool would this be? So we talked, and we talked, and we talked, and we talked, and it took us a year and a half. But in December of 1992, we had the whole hour on Donahue. We had 18 million people see that show. My dancers danced. My artistic director, Judith Jamison, spoke. It was a fantastic hour. By itself, it wouldn't have done anything. Because marketing, you have to do it and do it and do it. You can't just do it once. But as the first salvo of my campaign, it was really pretty potent. The next month, January of '93, was President Clinton's first inauguration. And through a board member, he was elected. I knew my board member was involved in the campaign. I called him the next day saying, what are they doing for the inauguration? Because I want to somehow get Ailey involved. And I found out they were going to have a gala the night before. And I called up the man who was running the inauguration. It was a man named Rahm Emanuel, who's gone on to other things. But he wasn't very famous then. And Mr. Emanuel said, you'd have to call Gary Smith. He's producing that night. So I called Gary Smith and said, good news, Mr. Smith. Rahm wants us on the show. We're ready. And Gary didn't want us because he already had Michael Jackson, Barbra Streisand, Fleetwood Mac, Michael Bowen, on and on and on. It was the most amazing group of people ever. And he didn't want my little dancers. But he didn't want to say no. So he said, well, you really couldn't be on it because you could only have 3 minutes, and you can't do anything in 3 minutes. So I went running back to Judith, my artistic director, said, what can we do in 3 minutes? Our big piece is Revelations. There's a section at the end where everyone wears yellow, and they dance to Rock My Soul in the Bosom of Abraham, and it's really wonderful and rousing. I said, we can do a 3-minute version of that. So I called up Gary, said, good news, Gar. You got us. We have the 3 minutes. He said, well, you couldn't do it because I need a video by tomorrow. We went running into the studio. And this is 91, where video cameras were a little bit more complicated than they are today, but we did it. Back and forth, we got on the gala. I'm telling you this story only to say you work hard at this stuff. This is not stuff that comes easily, but it pays off. We got on the gala with Michael Jackson and Barbara Streisand and Aretha Franklin and Fleetwood Mac, on and on and on. And 88 million people saw that TV show. But almost more important, I knew there was going to be a finale at the end where all the artists would come on stage, and Bill Clinton, the night before he becomes president, was going to come on stage and be with all his favorite artists. And I told my dance, I knew my dancer would be put in the back because they were not famous in their own right to that many people. So I told them they'd get a bonus if they got to the front of the row. So if you look online at all the pictures from the next day, which were on the front page of every newspaper almost in the world, there's Bill Clinton, all my dancers in their yellow costumes, and poor Michael Jackson fighting for his life, being knocked off to the back. It was truly a great moment. But coming, I am obsessive about this stuff, but coming the month after Donahue, now it's starting to feel like something. In March of that year, we did an exhibition at the Smithsonian Institution about the history of the Ailey organization. It was our 35th anniversary year. Now, 35 is not usually a big anniversary, but I decided we're going to make it one. And so we did this big exhibition. And there was press, and there was all kinds of good coverage, and it was something that you can leave on the walls. And I believe as any of you who run a performing arts organization, at one of your big anniversary years, do an exhibition. It can be at a local library, university, cultural center, whatever. Do an exhibition. It's a chance to show who you are, what you've contributed, and it's something to leave up. You don't have to recreate it every day the way we do our performances, so that it can sit up for 2 months and be a great cultivation tool. Right? In July of that year, we did a big free concert in Central Park. I said it was our 35th anniversary. It was one of our funders' 35th year of giving to the arts. I went to them, said, would you fund a concert for us in Central Park? It wasn't that expensive, but I thought it could be really great PR for them and for us. They said yes. 30,000 people came to the performance. CNN covered it and did a 2-minute story and had it on the air 48 times over the next 24 hours. Every half hour, there was 2 minutes about Alvin Ailey. Internationally, you can't buy that kind of visibility. That was in July. In August, the city of New York named our street Alvin Ailey Place. The mayor at the time was Rudolph Giuliani, who was a little sane then, and he allowed us to name our street. And if you go to New York, West 61st Street is still Alvin Ailey Place, even though the Ailey companies moved to a different building, but that's another story. In November of '93, 2 books were published about the organization. One was an autobiography of Judith Jamison, our artistic director. One was a book of photographs by a man named Jack Mitchell, who'd been photographing Ailey since almost its entire history, since 1960. So it was a history of Ailey in photographs. And in December of '93 was our 35th anniversary season, and we opened with a big gala with Al Jarreau, Jesse Norman, and Dionne Warwick singing Revelations live with a poem written and read by Maya Angelou, hosted by Phylicia Rashad and Denzel Washington. It was a cast of thousands, okay? Everywhere you turned around, there was Ailey doing something visible and exciting and mission-related. Everywhere you turned around, it was something engaging. In 1992, before we did all this, our fundraising for the year was $1.7 million. In 1993, when all of this was going on, our fundraising doubled to $3.4 million. We paid off the entire historic deficit of Ailey in the 1 year. Why? Because people, 2 reasons. One, because people wanted to join our family. Because we were so out there. It was so fun. Every time you turned around, Ailey was doing something important that everyone wanted to be part of us. That big increase, by the way, was not one big gift. It was not some foundation gave us $500,000. It was lots of $100, $500, $1,000. A lot more family members. Remember, our family are our audience, or our students, or our visitors, depending on the nature of our organization, our volunteers, our donors, and yes, our board. The second reason why our fundraising did so well is that my board went from being embarrassed to being proud. When I got to Ailey in 1991, January of 91, and we were going bankrupt, and I went to each of my 36 board members, and I say, who do you know? I'll do all the work. Just give me some names. Open a door. Write a letter. And the astonishing thing was not one of my board members had ever met another human being. They knew nobody. I know some of you have been there. When all this was going on, all of a sudden my board made thousands of friends in the 1 year. Because all of a sudden, they didn't feel like they were asking their friend for a favor, they felt like they were doing their friend a favor. Does that make sense? Great art and really aggressive marketing, and then welcoming people in and making them feel part of us is the key to success. Many organizations I see do this and actually do this, but they don't know how to welcome people in. They're shy, or they're standoffish, or they're so busy running around steaming the costumes that they're never in front of house to say, hi, let me get to know you. Does that make sense what I'm saying? When you do this well, and when you build this well, you end up getting money. Partly it's earned income, and partly it's through this funny mechanism we call fundraising. And then, crucially important, when the money we get in the main goes back into great art, that we market well, the family gets bigger and happier and more engaged, and we get more money. And then we do even better art. And one of the things I see happening to too many organizations, and I'll be honest, to too many small and mid-sized organizations, is when this starts and when all of a sudden you get some big gifts, all of a sudden you say, you know what? It's time to build a building. Ailey, I was approached when we paid off the deficit in 1993. I can't tell you how many people came to say, now it's time to build a building, now it's time to build a building. And I kept saying, no, it's not. No, it's not. We're just getting out of the hole. Now it's time to build our family and build our strength and build our programming, and let's make sure that we're really vibrant and vital. This can wait until this is going so well that we can afford to take money out of the system and we won't suffer. And I left Ailey after 93, and my replacement, who's a wonderful, great, talented woman named Sharon Luckman, who then ran the company for 15, 16 years, withstood the pressure for a decade to build the building. And she built the family and built the family and built the family, and when time was right, she said, now it's time. And now Ailey has one of the great dance buildings in America, in the world, and they incurred no debt doing it, and they didn't miss a beat doing it, and they didn't lose any performances doing it, because it was time. Does that make sense? The other one is, let's build an endowment. Let's take all the money out and build an endowment. Endowments are fantastic when we have the wherewithal to do the endowment, but not until this is humming, until the art's so great and we don't have to worry and we're building this family who loves us. By the way, one important thing I didn't mention about the institutional marketing that I do want to go back to just for 1 second was, because some of you are saying, well, that's fine for Ailey, they're a big company, I can't do any of that stuff. Let me tell you that none of this cost us a penny. Donahue paid for the Donahue Show, the inauguration paid for the performance there, the Smithsonian paid for the exhibition, the funder who I mentioned was celebrating their 35th anniversary too, paid for Central Park, the city paid for street naming, the publishers paid for the 2 books, and we made money in the gala. Okay? Great institutional marketing doesn't have to cost money. It takes lots of time, lots of creativity, knowing who you know. As Brett Egan, my colleague in the Institute, and who will teach you next time, will tell you is everybody knows someone more famous than they are. Everyone can do something that brings visibility. We all know someone who can be more famous than we are. And we can all do something that's vibrant and exciting. And we do vibrant and exciting stuff every day, but I think almost we do too many vibrant and exciting things. And then we expect board members to come to everything and prospects to come to everything. And I always want you to pick a few moments a year. It could be 4, it could be 5, it could be 2, it could be 10. But pick a few moments and say, these are the moments we're going to galvanize around. These are the moments we're going to get all of our prospects to. These are the moments where the whole board's going to show up. We're not going to send our board invitations to 400 events. If they want to, we're not going to hide them from them, but we want them to pick a few a year that we're all going to come to, make big deals, talk to the press, do our social media, and really build them into major items. That's what creates institutional marketing, and that's what helps us build our family, and that's what helps us get more money, which results, very importantly, in our art. Does this make sense? Before we take a break, I want to talk about one more concept, and then we will take a break. When you hit a budget slump, what are the first 2 things you tend to cut? Marketing and art. We'll do a little smaller production, we'll do a smaller exhibition. When you cut art and when you cut marketing, your family gets bored. And one of the big challenges of this world is that there's so many places for our family to put their attention. Just look in this room, right? There's no shortage of great places in Denver to participate. So if one organization gets dull, you just go to the next one. I'd like to give an example of that. I ran a ballet company in New York called American Ballet Theater. It's the largest kind of ballet company in New York. 7 years before I arrived, they took a tour to London. And in London, they self-presented, meaning there wasn't a presenter who was taking the risk. ABT took the risk. They went, they hired a theater, they paid for the marketing, and they were going to get all the tickets. And Mikhail Baryshnikov was the artistic director, and he said, I'm so famous that everyone's going to want to come and see my company, and we'll make lots of money. Well, in the event, no one came, and they lost lots of money. So they came back to New York, and it was time for them for their annual season, which is at the Metropolitan Opera. And they said, what can we do as our featured ballet? Every year there's like a featured ballet for the season. What can we do for the featured ballet of the season? We have no money, and we owe all this money from London. What can we do? And someone had the bright idea, well, last year we did Romeo and Juliet, and it was a huge success, and everyone loved it, and the critics loved it, and the audiences loved it, and the donors loved it. And we have the sets, and we have the costumes, and the dancers know it, and the orchestra knows it. So we're going to do Romeo and Juliet again as our featured ballet. So when you do a work again as your featured work, it's a little harder to market, right? Everyone's already seen it. It's hard to get the press to write advanced stories, right? And your family gets a little bored. Yeah, I went last year. I guess I'll go again. I loved it. And the donors were... But they lost a few people, and they end up with a little less money than they had the year before. So now it's time for the next year, for the New York season. And what's our featured ballet going to be? We have less money than we had last year. And what are we going to do? So what did they choose to do? Romeo and Juliet. Because the dancers knew it, the orchestra knew it, they had the sets, they had the costumes. So now it's 3 years in a row of Romeo and Juliet. Really hard to market. Press is hostile. Audience is evaporating. Donors are evaporating. Less money. Year 4, Romeo and Juliet. 7 years in a row. And by the time I arrived, the family was down to me and my mother. It's a good line, but it's true. We do it to ourselves. We do it to ourselves. When we don't make our art as vibrant as it can be, when we don't do the marketing we need to do, when we don't welcome people in, we're not going to get the money. Now, I've given examples from a big organization. Now I'd like to give an example from a smaller organization. My first job in the arts was running a little ballet company in Kansas City called the Kansas City Ballet. At that time, it was really small. The administrative staff was 4 of us in a room. So I know many of you can identify. My approach was different, was the same. The specifics were different. Kansas City Ballet couldn't do a presidential gala. Kansas City Ballet wasn't going to get the Smithsonian. But that didn't mean we couldn't do things to enliven ourselves in the community and get people talking about us. And this is really important because I really want you to understand that this model is not a model for large organizations. This just makes sense. And what did we do at the Kansas City Ballet? Well, one thing we did is we negotiated a debut tour to New York City. We were the first organization in the history of Kansas City to perform in New York. It was a small presenter, but we at least were going. That was a big deal in Kansas City. What else did we do? My artistic director recreated a work, who had been a New York City Ballet dancer and choreographer, recreated a ballet by George Balanchine that hadn't been seen in 25 years. When he recreated that work, the whole dance world came. And every dance press person, every critic came to Kansas City to see the recreation of that work. Your most exciting art can be your best institutional marketing. What else did we do? This is something that some of you will consider fundraising, but I call it institutional marketing. Oh, I'm sorry, Susan, now you have it. You're the chosen one. God is smiling at you and is going to give you great institutional marketing ideas. So, this is an idea that I'd like you to think about. Any organization can do that. An organization with no employees can do this. In Kansas City, which is a lovely town with quite a bit of wealth, but it's landlocked and there's not a lot of places to spend your money. So what people do is they buy each other's homes and redecorate. That's the way you entertain yourselves in Kansas City, if you're in the donor class. And so one of my board members had bought one of these huge, beautiful old homes and was completely redoing it. And I went to him and I said, David, don't let anyone in your house. Just do it. Why don't you open your house with an event and we'll invite 50 or so really great people and they're going to want to see the house and it'll be great. We won't charge any money for it, but it'll just be a great opportunity for us to talk about the ballet a little bit. So he was happy to do that, and we invited the best donor prospects in Kansas City to his home. And they wanted to see the house. They could care less about hearing about the ballet. The Kansas City Ballet had a tagline, the company that can't make payroll. Because every 2 weeks we had to call around and ask people for money, $200 here, $300 here. The payroll was rather small, but still we didn't have it. And I knew this wasn't the way we could make it work. So I wrote a strategic plan for the Kansas City Ballet. And that night I reviewed the plan. At the middle of the cocktail party, everyone gathered in the living room, in the beautiful new decorated living room. And I talked a bit about the plan, and I gave everyone there a copy of the plan. That night changed the history of the Kansas City Ballet. Because everyone there went from thinking of us as the company that can't make payroll to an organization that had we understood our problems. I didn't varnish over them. I was totally transparent, but I also gave the solutions, like going to New York, like this ballet by George Balanchine, like doing a gala with stars from a variety of other ballet companies because my artistic director knew them. Again, using what we call assets. Who do we know? What do we know? What can we put together? And we put together a whole institutional marketing campaign for the Kansas City Ballet. We found an early morning talk show called Good Morning Kansas City on television. No one wanted to be on it because you had to get up at 3 in the morning to do it. But I got up and the show was like at 4:30 and I did 20 minutes 4 times a year. And who watched that but the business community getting ready for work? Or we put in our board one of the newscasters from the local NBC affiliate. And his board contribution was to put us on his show 3 times a year for 5 minutes. So that got us. We built a whole campaign. And we explained this to the donors, or the prospects. They weren't donors yet, prospects. And they started to believe in us. And today, the Kansas City Ballet went from literally the company that can't make payroll to having a gorgeous dance building in Kansas City, a performing arts center that was built in Kansas City primarily to house them, even though the symphony believes it's different, but it's not true. And it's a real success story. That was taking an organization with 4 staff and turning it into now a really successful organization. Does this happen fast? No. It takes time. The cycle's about doing it year in, year out. You never stop. You never stop thinking about that piece of art. How can I make it better? How can I make it more interesting? What do I really want to say? Really thinking through the marketing program. Really thinking about the way we engage people. Really thinking about doing smart, focused fundraising. And then really making sure whatever money we had focused on mission-driven art and not on making our offices look nicer. Year in, year out, year in, year out, year in, year out. And you know what? Over time, your family builds. And you get 3 more people this year, and 6 more people that year, and 12 more people that year. And then your new family members bring you new family members, and you start to build. This really does work, and it's not about the size of the organization. Are there questions? I've been talking way too much. Are there questions about this? Thoughts, problems? Yes, sir.
Yes, Michael. You wrote the strategic plan.
I did.
And this may be something you're going to cover later, but with that, there was a little bit more than a spark of creativity in building upon your assets and what you had. What's the magic that went into that strategic plan, whether you're talking about Kansas City or the New York Ballet?
What makes the plan work is creativity. I believe arts management is as creative as being a playwright or a painter. I really do. It means freeing your brain and saying, what could we do that's amazing, rather than we have no money, what are we going to do? We can't make payroll. The only way you're going to get to the point you can make payroll consistently is by people being engaged by your organization. It's not going to be by worrying about the payroll. And I think we in the arts in America broadly, and that's not true for everyone, so accept yourself if you don't feel it's true for you, but I think a lot of us have started to focus so much about money and so little about the creativity of the work we do. And instead of saying, what kind of opera do we want to make, or what kind of storytelling program do we want to have, we think about, what can we do with $6,000? And I can tell you that creativity does not come from a budget. Creativity comes from the fertile minds of the people in this field who love this work and are here for a reason and are really creative people, but who oftentimes are not focusing on what's going to be the most wonderful thing to express. They're focusing on, what can I afford to do? Or how do I fill a slot? Or what am I going to do next November that's not going to cost us too much? That's not the way I think we can engage people. And it's not what's going to inspire them to want to be part of us. Yes?
Well, there's a lot in this that is resonating and so helpful. And I'm Louise Moderato. I'm the director of Redline. And I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is in terms of our return on investment when it comes to building our family and our social return on investment, and how we balance the difference of that when it comes to growing a family. Because I know that one of the things we challenge with is we have a challenge with is that we have our core focus programs that we're trying to build, but then we're also trying to always be nimble and responsive to how communities are evolving and their needs in tandem with that. And so balancing kind of this need to support our core programming, while not necessarily being the Romeo and Juliet case where it's just the same thing, while also being available to help build the family with new opportunities and educating around new opportunities come with cost and all those things. So
It's a great question. I'm going to ask you to hold it till after the break, only because it so talks to what we're going to say next, okay? It's such a good lead-in. But I do want to say one thing which I didn't say, but your question leads me to this because it's really important. What determines our programming is our mission, right? That's what's determining our programming. The programming is not just like what's going to sell or what's going to be wonderful. It's about what are we trying to accomplish. I'm not about doing programming because it's going to please a donor. I never do that. In fact, I actively say to my biggest donors, I'm not creating this art for you. They oftentimes look at me like in shock when I say that. But I say it all the time. Because the truth is, I'm not creating the art to make the donor happy. I'm creating the art because I have a mission. My organization has a mission. And my purpose in life is to make that mission come to fruition. And I need a happy, engaged family. I'm not anti my donors, but I'm not creating it simply to make a donor group happy. Does that make sense? And so this, to me, is what's motivating everything we do and why we come to work every day. And I believe that there's always creativity that can be brought to bear to this. And it can be an old program, or it can be a new program. But even an old program, how do you make that old program be a little different this year? Or how do you put a spotlight on it? See, I find that a lot of organizations, in their marketing, they only put the marketing focus on that which has earned income potential. I find too many arts organizations only market the thing that either everyone knows the best already, or they need the ticket sales, or they need the tuition. So they put the focus on that because they think of marketing tied to earned income. And I'm here to tell you that marketing has just as big an impact on fundraising as it does on earned income. And if we only tell people about the things we do on the stage, for instance, and never tell them about our outreach programming, or our educational programming, or how we work with at-risk youth, or whatever it is we do in our organization, if we never put a spotlight on that, we only put a spotlight on the thing that there's earned income, then people aren't going to know we do this other stuff, and they're not going to get engaged. And you know what? There are many more family members who will love us because of what we do off the stage than what we do on the stage. You know, I've spent much of my career in dance, and I know we have lots of dance people here today, and I'll be honest, for a lot of funders, dance isn't their favorite thing. It's the art form I always say people like to do the most and watch the least. That's a vast generalization, of course. But I've had to raise lots of money for dance. So I had to engage people in the dance company, and I found there was a whole group of people who would fund us because they loved our dance, but there was a whole group of people who loved us because of the things we did that weren't dancing, but were dance-related, that really built, you know, running Ailey. Ailey is something called Ailey Camp that's about working with at-risk preteens. It's a great program in many cities now. It's really a great program. Started in Kansas City, Missouri, by the way. Great program, totally funded. You don't have to love dance to want to fund Ailey Camp. So we need to be thinking about the key program that's important to us and our mission. Think about how do we make it as important as possible, not even interesting, important as possible, and then how do we really put a spotlight on it? And I think we don't do a good job of that. And that's why a lot of people in the community do think we're not as important as the hospital or the homeless shelter, because we haven't told them about what we do with so many other programs. And to, is it Jamie? Is that your name? Is that how it's pronounced? Because your first point was they don't know because we haven't told them. We haven't put a spotlight on them. When I create this kind of campaign for a lot of my clients, I'm putting in their spotlights on parts of what they do. They're going, really? You're going to waste all that effort on that? I go, it's not a waste. It's important what you're doing. People don't know you do it. And I want them to know that. So I think we can do a better job. Yes, sir.
Well, you're touching on a challenge that I wanted to bring up before, and that's that we tend to chase money
Yep.
that has tags on it, and we have to adjust our artistic vision
Yep.
in order to get that money, in order to survive this season.
I call it being an amoeba. You know, it's like we have our mission, but oh, we'll add this little piece, and we'll add this little piece, and we'll add this little piece because it'll please this donor and that donor, and we end up looking like an amoeba rather than focused on something that we really wanted to do. We're going to have a whole session on strategic planning towards the end of the program, but let me just say that to me, mission is everything. I always say that it's really easy to be in the for-profit sector because your mission's in the words for profit. They might say we bring beauty to transportation, or we give you the great experience of a hotel, but their missions are for profit. In fact, that's a legal thing. They have to do that, otherwise they can get sued by their shareholders. So that's legal. In the not-for-profit world, we only know what we're not for. It's true. But what are we for? That's the mission. The mission is not some pretty statement you put on everything. The mission is not some exercise you do for funding. The mission is, what are you really trying to accomplish? And it's critical that it be clear. It's critical that everyone understand it. It's critical that your programming responds to that. You don't want to be adding lots of other programmings just because you think you're going to get some extra money here or there. I'm telling you, it takes your focus away from their mission. I want you to think about, what could I do that's so amazing that's going to help me get this mission accomplished? And first, I want you to do a really good, thoughtful mission. I don't care about the statement, the words. My mission at the Kennedy Center was a matrix. It wasn't even sentences. So it's not about the format. It's about the thought of exactly what are you trying to do. Why does your organization exist? And now let's do that so creatively and so wonderfully. And let's make sure that we don't start adding bits and bobs on and diffuse. We're all modestly sized. We can't afford to do that and still do a great job of what we're there to do. Yes?
That kind of was along the lines of my question, which is, is there any gatekeeping in terms of the family? Like,
in terms of I didn't hear the last word.
Is there any gatekeeping in terms of the family, certain family members or partners that would create some dysfunction? Or is it, doors are wide open, let's bring everybody in?
We're going to do a session on boards in a few months, and I'll talk more about this then, but I'm going to say this in a sort of a funny, blunt way, but I sort of mean it. I'm very happy to fire a board member if they're not functional, if they're not helpful, if they're causing dysfunction. So yes, I don't want people around who are going to cause dysfunction. Now, every once in a while, we're in a situation where we have one huge donor and they're a challenge, and then we have to figure out a way to manage around that. I'm realistic. I'm not just, Pollyanna about this. But I don't want to bring dysfunction to my organization. It's too hard to do this really well. The concept's really easy. It's easy to talk about it. It's hard to do well. It's really hard to do well. It looks so comfortable and easy, but to get the art really right and to get the marketing really well and to bring the people in and to do this consistently, month in, month out, this is hard. And we have to be a team on this. One of the reasons I like the cycle is because it makes it clear there's no silos here. It's not about the artists are over here and the marketers over here. We're all in this together. And we're in it with the board and the staff. We're in it with all the work we do. We all are making an organism that works. And we can't afford dysfunction. It's waste. We can't afford waste. Okay? With that, we're going to take a break. Okay? It's now 10:25. Let's take a 15-minute break. Let's get together at 10:40 sharp. I start on time, okay? Thank you. I never am late. Did you? The houses. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, could we start up again, please?
A request not from you, but necessarily from the organization is send out a list of all the attendees and their contact information.
Okay. I want to spend the rest of the next hour focused on this. I can't tell you how to make great art. I wish I could. But I can talk about artistic planning. And so I just want to ask you this, and I need you just to raise your hands. And when I ask you to raise your hand, leave it up until I tell you to put it down, okay? So don't just go, mm-mm. Raise your hand if your organization plans its programming, artistic or otherwise, at least 6 months in advance. This doesn't count. All right, keep it up, keep it up. No, just, that was the point, keep it up. Now, leave your hand up if you plan your programming at least a year in advance. I see some people going like he won't really see us, but I don't want to say we don't. But leave your hand up if you plan your art at least 2 years in advance. Leave your hand up if you plan your art at least 3 years in advance. It's always the opera company who stays on that. But, so we have 2 groups, okay, 3 years. Okay, I'm going to now ask you to relax as I say my next sentence. We're going to encourage you to be thinking about your artistic and educational and other programming 5 years in advance. Now, let me explain why. And then, so let me go through my little monologue about why, and then you can tell me why it's really wrong for your organization and how stupid I am, okay? And when I say 5 years in advance, I'm not saying everything you're going to do. I'm talking about the bigger stuff you're going to do or the things you're going to focus on. I make a very simple chart. I do it in pencil because it changes, but I look at the seasons. So we're in the 18-19 season, the 19-20 season, 2021, blah, blah, okay? And I keep a list of the projects we're planning to do this season and the ones I know about next season. And I'm thinking about some the season after and the season after and even the season after. And I review this and review this and review this almost every day. Why? Why do I look so far out? Okay, several reasons. Number one, I believe we make better art usually if we take time to think about it and to really plan it. And rather than rush it saying, we have nothing for next December, what are we going to do? Let's just do this. I like to dwell on this. I think because I take the cycle really seriously, I take each element really seriously, and I spend a lot of time thinking about my art. Again, I'm using the word art instead of programming, just shorter, but for those of you who are doing educational work, again, just program. I'm really talking about programming. I think about it a lot. I don't take it for granted, and I don't rush it because I really want to think. Number one, that's one reason. Number two, I find I can collaborate with far broader range and oftentimes better artists if I give them a longer lead time. If you call up Yo-Yo Ma and say, we want you in February, he's going to say, no, I'm booked. If you call up Yo-Yo Ma and say, when in the next 7 years can you come? He cannot say he's booked. I really work hard in giving latitude to the artists I really want to work with. They can be performers, they can be people who write writers, they can be directors, they can be educators, whatever it is. But I really want to make sure I work with the people I really want to work with. And I find particularly for smaller and mid-sized organizations, there's an insecurity that so-and-so won't want to work with us, or we're too small. I ran this little library in New York. This is a long time ago, a research library / museum. Beautiful little place, but small. And we were doing an exhibition about Beatrix Potter. And you know, the woman who wrote Peter Rabbit and all that stuff, and she drew those little drawings. We did this beautiful exhibition about Beatrix Potter. And we always had a slide lecture at lunchtime. For free, you could come and watch this little lecture about an exhibition. And it was always narrated by our curators, who were brilliant, brilliant people, but they were the most boring speakers. And no one ever came to our slide lectures except for homeless people because it was so boring. And I wanted to change this because we had a guest curator doing the Beatrix Potter show. So I said to myself, I really want to have a different narrator. And I went to the curator, who was a guest curator, and so she wasn't used to narrating our lectures. I said, would you mind, you can write the lecture, would you mind if someone else delivers it? She said, I don't care. So then I said, who in the world sounds like Beatrix Potter? And I decided Julie Andrews sounded like Beatrix Potter. And here I am running this little library in New York, had no relationship with Julie Andrews. I just wrote her a letter. Said, dear Miss Andrews, I think you sound like Beatrix Potter. Will you narrate our slide lecture? And she said, this will tell you how long ago it was. She said, if you send me a cassette tape, I'll record it. And then you have to send me a self-addressed stamped envelope. You're paying for the return postage. I said, okay. And she narrated our slide lecture, and she let us use little snippets of it for our radio commercials. Had the biggest attendance in the history of that library. We can work with great artists. We just have to give them time, make it on their own terms, and not rush it, and not say we only have a slot 6 weeks from now, because they're going to say no. So I think we get better artists. We can work with our dream artists, and most of us have a dream artist. Number 3, I think we can do a better job of marketing if we have time. I'll give you an example. At the Kennedy Center, I had this dream project, which was to do a huge festival of Arab culture. It's called Arabesque. There are 22 Arab countries, and we had artists from all of them. And it was a very big festival. And I gave myself 5 years to put it together, to figure out who we wanted to work with so the art was better than if we had rushed it, to make sure we could get the cream of the crop for the best artists, but especially so I could put together a marketing program. I knew my base audience didn't know anything about Arab culture. So I was going to have to work hard to market this. And so one of the relationships I formed was with public broadcasting. I went to them and I said, we have this really interesting project. I knew they were trying to diversify what they did in terms of their arts programming. I said, we have a really, really interesting project coming up 5 years from now. How can we work together? And we ended up getting on the nightly news 10 minutes a day, 5 days in a row. Every day, they sent a journalist to each of 5 different Arab countries, did a whole segment on that, and put it on all in 1 week. Unprecedented coverage for a project, only because we had 5 years to figure this out. I think we can do a better job marketing if we think it through. But I especially think we do a better job of fundraising. It gets to the problem of the too small family. And, oh, I'm sorry, it was Kim who said the thing about losing the big donor, right? Sorry. See, I think we have too few family members because we don't take the time to cultivate people, foundations, countries, corporations who could be really interested in a project we're thinking about because we don't have enough time. So let's take that Arab festival example. I had 5 years to cultivate new donors, and I took those 5 years. I researched who would be interested in this, which companies would be interested, which foreign governments would be interested in it. And then I set about to cultivate those. I couldn't have done it in a 3 or 6 month period. Those of you who plan your art 1 year in advance, I couldn't have done it in a year. It took too long. But over 5 years, we raised all the money for the festival. 60% of the money raised came from donors who had never funded us before. And this was a big, expensive festival, let me tell you. 60% came from donors we had never met, because I had time. I had the luxury of time. The other thing I think this allows us to do is to look at budgets farther in advance. I can start thinking about, do these budgets work? And then I can say, you know what, there's too much expense here. Let's take this really expensive project and move it here, and let's take this less expensive project and make it there, move it there. And I can start moving things around in a way that allows me to really, really make sure that we have the resources to do these projects. The most important reason I love this approach is because it starts to reduce the tension between the executive side of the organization and the artistic side of the organization. Now, I'm sure that doesn't exist in any of your organizations, and you're all best, you agree on everything. But I have observed for a lot of organizations, the artistic leader, I'm using generalizations here, don't hold it against me. I know Dawn's already mad at me for what I'm about to say, but the artistic leader acts like the naughty child. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And the executive director acts like the angry parent. No, we cannot afford that. And we end up with this tension between the two people on earth who've got to be the most united of any two people on earth. And what I do, because I've always been on the executive side, not the artistic side, when I start to work for a new organization, I sit down with the artistic, I say, what do you want? Tell me every project you dream of. And I love dreams. I think we dream too little in the arts these days. I want to hear the dreams, but then I take and I array those dreams over a number of years, because we can't do them all today. And we get nervous as executives because we can't afford it today, so we say, no, we can't afford it, because we're going, oh my God, where would I find the money for that thing? And yet, it's a great project. And our job is not to restrict the dreams of our artistic director. It's exactly the opposite. Our job is to foster the artistic dreams of our artistic directors. But we don't do that if we're constantly saying no. So what I do is I array them in a way that I think is affordable. And then I go back to the artistic director and say, here, you get everything you want in this sequence. Does that work for you? And sometimes I say, no, I really want to do this before that, or this is move here. And that's great. We start to negotiate that. But I immediately don't look like I'm trying to limit what the artist is doing. Does that make sense? I'm just letting them do what they want to do. I'm just trying to do it in a way, in a sequence that's affordable, where I can develop the resource. My whole theory is based on artist rules, art rules, quality, excitement, importance of art rules. But we can't always afford to do it this year, so let's put it when we can, but let's work towards it. And what I do is I reshape the workload. So while this looks like a lot of work, it frankly isn't. Just have a nice glass of wine, if that's what you drink, or whatever you drink. For me, it's Sprite Zero. And you sit in a room and you just dream. What would be so amazing? What have I always wanted to do? When you look at the great works of art in the last 20 years, they did not come from a budget meeting. They came from someone having a dream about doing something amazing. And then figure out, when do we think we can afford it? And then start working on it. And some of you will say, I'm so busy already. You want me to work on art 4 years from now, today? How can I have the time? And what I'm going to tell you is, once you start getting into this pattern, you're just shifting the workload. There's a lot less work the year of and a lot more work the years before. You're just shifting the workload. So each year becomes less frenetic. It's less hectic. You've planned things through. You've thought them through. You've found some donors. You've thought about marketing. And you can actually pursue lots of really wonderful projects. We believe in projects that we call transformational projects. Transformational projects are those amazing projects that come along once every couple of years or 3 years or 4 years that are so amazing and people can't believe you could actually make that happen, or where it came from, or that idea was so creative. We believe that those really go a long way to building your institutional image. Those projects can't be done in 6 weeks or with $6. You've got to plan for it. So we want to make sure you think about this dream, amazing project, but stick it out 3 or 4 years so that you don't have to get it all done this year. But we want to make sure that every year has highlights. Every year has some programs that are going to get people talking, and they're going to be people saying, wow, that organization is so interesting. And we don't think you can do it just giving yourself 6 months to get it done. Does this make it all sense? Okay, tell me all the reasons you hate it. Please. You can't all love it, because then you're going to go home and you have to do a 5-year plan tomorrow. Yes.
I don't know if this is something that you can give
I'll try. Yeah, you can't, if you're determined, if it is true for your organization, it's fair but I find most organizations that's not true for all of their works, it's true for some of their works. And I'm not filling every slot. I'm leaving room for spontaneity. But some of the bigger projects you can't do in a very short time frame. So I'm not suggesting planning every project 5 years out. I'm saying pick a few that are really big, meaty, that you think will still have resonance and fulfill your mission if you give yourself a few years to do it. And for some organizations, you can't do it 5 years, it's 3 years. I don't care. There's no magic to 5. I just don't want it to be 6 months for everything. Because what it does is it limits the size of the project, I find. Organizations that spend only 6 months to a year before the project happens, every year oftentimes looks similar to the year before, or at least similar size things. I like the element of surprise. I want to surprise the world. I want to go, wow, where'd that come from? And I don't think that can happen if you only have a few months to get it done and the same donors who are always funding you. So if you're in an organization where you got to be spontaneous, you're responding to immediate world events, or where you only work with hyper-contemporary art, then you have to leave, you can do it a shorter time frame, leave some more slots, but plan one thing. There has to be an artist that you want to work with that you know is going to be relevant 3 years from now. Or in fact, when I did my Arab festival, I was betting that it was still going to be a relevant topic 5 years later. Do you know what I mean? I had to, and I think that for most organizations, we don't have to limit it to a 6 or 12-month time period. There's some who just say to me, no, I'm not going to do this. I can't make you. But I think you lose a lot because I think there are other organizations that are going to end up doing things that are more adventuresome and more challenging. And I'm going to use the word grand, but I'm not talking about the money side. I'm talking about sort of the grand vision. Yes, Greg?
I'm very interested in, we have done a lot of 5-year looks at things, but are there some good tactics to get a board to come along with you on that kind of planning journey, both from an artistic perspective, but also from a financial budgeting perspective?
Yeah. See, I find it harder to get a board to go along with me if I want to do this huge project 6 months from now than if I want to do this huge project 5 years from now, because that feels remote and at least gives us time to plan. When I'm doing this, before I go to my board, and I do present this whole thing to the board, and I find the boards actually like seeing a longer term view, but what I'm also going for is there's a strategy for how I'm going to build donor base to support these various larger projects. I'm not just going with the ideas, the projects themselves. So I'm going saying, this is the Arab project, here's my idea for where we're going to get the money, blah, 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 and we've already started building this relation, we've already started doing that, and to give some confidence that we're really working in that direction. It is not just that we're arraying things on the chart and only working on them the year they happen. We're working them early. And I find boards actually appreciate that view. There's one more reason I like doing this, which I also think helps boards, which I find that we can have our mission statement, but really to the world, this is the manifestation of our mission. And when I can show 5 years and how this is moving us and how this is really helping us accomplish all we want to do, it's so much easier than if I only show 1 year of programming. Does that make sense? Someone else? Yes, hi.
So our organization does not present or produce or exhibit. We go into mostly schools and also into community settings, and we have teaching artists, customized programs with constituents. So I'm translating this process in my brain, and what my brain is saying is, oh, this is a 5-year strategic plan. But I don't think that's what you're talking about. I think you're talking about something more than that.
Yes and no. You've got a very smart brain. And I find this works equally well if you're doing outreach and education programming or whatever, however you define your work, the kinds of programming you're talking about. What I find is when people do strategic plans, they leave this out. They talk about how they're going to market, they talk about how they're going to do fundraising, what kind of board they want to build, their staffing, their financials, but they're never specific about the art. Or not never, rarely. And when I say art, programming. And so what happens is, I don't know how you can do a marketing plan if you don't know what you're marketing, personally. And I think your fundraising plan seems like wishes and dreams if it's not rooted in a project. How can you talk about how you're going to build your donor base without knowing the projects you're doing to talk about which kind of donors you think you can attract? To me, most strategic plans in the arts read like wishes and dreams. We're going to build our fundraising. Our goal, our objective one is to have a younger audience. Never talks about how you're going to do it, just says you're going to do it. I think that what we need to be able to do is to be specific about the programming. So in this sense, it is part of a strategic plan. But for your programs, it's a little more challenging than it is for a ballet company that just keeps moving the works around. For you, you have some consistent projects. But I would say one thing to you is, what are you doing to put a spotlight? What kind of special project are you going to do to allow the community to learn about the work you're doing with the children? Where is that? And what's it going to be? And what's going to make it wonderful? So yes, this is part of a strategic plan, but it's not the whole thing of a strategic plan. But a good strategic plan should have this in it. Absolutely. Other questions, problems? Yes? Not. Bless you. I don't announce to the world the whole thing in a big announcement. Partly because one of my institutional marketing moments is often the annual season announcement. I like a big moment where I surprise the world with what we're doing next year. There are occasions where I announce a project way early for a variety of reasons. When I did my Arab festival, I did, in part because I wanted my community to get over the shock of it, and because I had to work with the government, try get visas for 900 Arabs to come to America in the same month. Not so easy. So there's a lot to go into this that needed advanced announcement. But mostly I don't announce it publicly. I am going to particular donors for particular projects. And I am telling my board certainly, and it's part of my strategic plan, but I'm not announcing to the world everything because it changes too. I had a whole play planned at the Kennedy Center and the actress died. So that was the end of that. You know, I do it in pencil. I move things around. Something that seemed like a great idea this year may seem like a bad idea next year. But I do share it in bits to various people and various funders. But I also do something else, and I really want to say this because I think it's critical. I find that when most of us do fundraising, we're nervous. We have a project coming up in 6 months. It's a big project. And we don't have all the money for it. And we're really nervous about that. So we go to all prospects and all donor meetings, say, we've got this great project to tell you about. It's so fantastic. It's going to be in 6 months. Let me tell you about it. And we go on and on and on and on. And the donor may have no interest in that project. And we've wasted the meeting. I don't do that when I fundraise. See, when I go to a donor, particularly when I go for the first time, a prospect, I don't talk about my organization so much. I mostly listen. And I mostly say, I have one favorite question, which was, tell me your favorite philanthropic experience ever. When did you give money that was the most meaningful to you? I learned so much from the response. I asked them what their giving interests are. I asked them what interests them in art, like what kind of art do you love? Then I'm thinking when they're talking, I call this my menu, and I'm thinking in my head which of these menu items is a great fit for them. By the way, if there isn't one, I tell them. I say, it's so great to learn about your giving interests. I don't have a project right now that's the right one for you, so I hope you'll let me come back when I do one day. I don't try and do what they do, you know, when women experience this, I think, more than men. You go to the clothing store, you put on a dress or a top, it's too big, and they hold it behind your back, and they try and make it seem like it fits. They say, oh, no, it's a perfect fit. But it isn't. I don't believe in doing that in fundraising. I believe in complete honesty in fundraising. And if I don't have a project, I tell them. And you know what? I get so much great response to that, particularly from the foundation world. Because a foundation has certain giving interests, and I can't match it. I'm dishonest. When I come back with a project that's right one day, I don't make a project to make the funder happy, but one day I have a project, I go, wait, that's a great project for the people we once talked with. I have so much credibility because I wasn't trying to grab that blouse behind the back. What I do is I'm listening and I'm saying, oh, this project's the perfect project for this funder. And now I start to explain this project, which is right up their alley. And all of a sudden I make a match that gets me a much better gift, a much bigger gift, and builds a relationship of honesty and of really understanding each other that's different than if I'm going just pushing what's coming up next because I don't have enough money to pay the bills. Does that make sense? It's once you get into this enough, what you find is over the years, you're already getting a lot of money in advance, so you have a lot of pledges in advance of a year. It's easier to sleep at night because you already know that this project 2 years from now is funded because you already found the funders to fund it. I don't think we do that enough, especially if we're small and mid-sized organizations. The large organizations typically have the leeway financially to do this, and they do it more, and it serves them well. I think we try and are so at this next project. So I want you to start thinking earlier. I want you to start thinking in advance. Other problems, challenges, concerns? Nobody? Are you just tired? Yes.
Hi, you mentioned transformational projects, so not just a really successful project every year or something that you're choosing to highlight. How, in your experience, how often do those happen in an organizational life cycle?
It depends on your size, it depends on luck, it depends on your creativity, and you know, it's not going to happen every year. It may not happen every 3 or 4 years. I'm not talking about blockbuster zone, like I'm not talking about just let's do a Van Gogh exhibition because we know everyone likes Van Gogh. I'm talking about coming up with that project that's so crazily interesting that people go, wow, and it changes the way the community views you. And then I'm talking about taking a project and making it as big as it can be. I'll give an example. At the Kennedy Center, my first big project that I wanted to do had been something in the back of my mind for 10 years. I was obsessed with the musicals of Stephen Sondheim, and I wanted to do like a museum exhibition of Stephen Sondheim because I felt there were so many misunderstandings about his work. And I wanted to create a project where people could see the works next to each other and have a sense that that the conventional wisdom was wrong. So I had this idea of doing 6 musicals in rep, in sets of 3, 2 sets of 3. So you could come for a weekend to see 3 different musicals. Really hard way of working, really hard way of producing theater, but it was something that I thought was exciting. And I wrote him a letter, never met the man. I'd like to do this. He thought I was insane, but he said, yeah, go try. And then I said, this is a big idea to do 6 productions all at the same time. By the way, the Kennedy Center, when I did this, hadn't produced theater work in 15 years of its own. So we had no experience in-house. So it was really crazy. But then I said, I want to make this bigger. So how could I make this bigger? Well, education was a theme of the work we do. We do a ton of education. I wanted to do something to put a spotlight on it. So I decided we would do a production of the first act of Into the Woods, one of the Sondheim musicals, with middle school children from the DC area. That ended up becoming a PBS special. We didn't plan that. That happened. I brought two great exponents of Sondheim's works, Barbara Cook and Mandy Patinkin, and they each did one-person shows. I started the whole thing with Frank Rich, who was then from the New York Times, now in New York Magazine, interviewing Stephen Sondheim on our stage. This whole festival got so big and exciting that we had planned to do this little thing, this discussion between the two of them in one of our smaller theaters, which has 500 seats. And we had to put it in our largest theater, the concert hall, with 2,300 seats, and every seat was sold. Okay. And then I said, how do we end this thing? We've had 6 productions. Oh, we also added a production of one of his musicals, Pacific Overtures, that came from Japan. It's about the British entry into Japan, and he had a production he liked from Japan. It was in Japanese. We added that into. So we had 7 full productions. We had Barbara Cook, we had Mandy Patinkin, we had Into the Woods Jr., and we had The Interview. And I said, how do we end this big mess? So I decided to be a little cheeky, and we took excerpts from everything and brought it to Lincoln Center in New York, our arch enemy, and did an evening of excerpts with everybody. And so this became a huge project. It changed the history of the Kennedy Center. It absolutely changed it. We had people fly in from 38 countries. We fully funded, it was a $10 million budget. It was a huge budget, fully funded. We got 8 feature stories in the New York Times alone, let alone everything else around the world. It just changed the way we were viewed. So we took a project, it had a curatorial point of view, and then we exploded it. This is what I want you to be thinking about. I don't want you just to fill in slots. I find too many organizations have slots. The Christmas slot, the family slot, the funny slot, news slot. You know what I'm talking about. I don't believe in slots planning. I believe that everything you do is a jewel. Now, some are going to be bigger and richer, and some are going to be less special. Not everything's going to be equally special. That's just fine. But I want to make sure you have those special ones planned and really dig into yourself. We're in this field for a reason. What are you trying to say? What are you trying to do? And that can be an educational program, or that can be a performance. But what could make it really special? How do you use technology in an interesting way to maybe make it broader? How do you one of the things we did at the National Symphony, I think it was after, Greg, you were there, because Greg from your opera company used to work at the Kennedy Center. But we perform in a place called Wolf Trap, which is an outdoor venue in the summer. And one of the things we did was we created a performance of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, where beforehand the conductor had pre-recorded a series of tweets about what to listen for in the music. And we ended up having 3,000 young people come to that performance, sitting on the lawn with their phones. It's not how I want to listen to Beethoven, but this is how they wanted to listen to Beethoven. And these tweets were released at the right points in the score so that these people got a sense of what the music was about. They had never heard a symphony before. And now all of a sudden they were sort of what to listen for and how this theme is repeated, or remember the oboe, or here's coming in this. And it was a whole thing. How much did that cost to do? Exactly $0. But it brought 3,000 people into an audience who you normally wouldn't have had. There are ways to think about things. What could you do that's really riveting? What can you do that's really exciting? Does that make sense, what I'm saying? And it really works. I promise you it really works. I promise you people think about you in a different way. Funders think about you in a different way. The press thinks about you in a different way. And we're living in this incredibly competitive world where there's so many forms of entertainment and where there's so many people who are trained to get the arts wherever and whenever they want. They put on their headsets and they look at their iPads, and it's 2 in the morning and they're binge watching Game of Thrones or whatever it is. We need to fight harder. And I'm not talking about fighting harder with fakery. I'm talking about fighting harder with the things we really want to express. I want you to dream, really. I really want you just to go back and dream. What would be the most amazing thing your organization could do? Forget money to start with. Money's real. We can't forget money ultimately. But don't start from the money. Don't start from the budget. Start from the dream of the idea. Otherwise, we're boring. And when we're boring, people watch Netflix. Yeah. Can we get a microphone here? Ilana.
Here we go.
When you were planning your Sondheim event, and you said it got much, much bigger than what you had originally planned, when you plan further out and you create your approximate budget, how do you manage it as it grows and grows and grows, and you've done your fundraising, and are you still finding more people to jump on board and help you support that growing vision?
The answer is yes. So for example, with that example of Sondheim, when I added the Frank Rich interview with Stephen Sondheim, it was the first time we got a grant in history at the Kennedy Center from the Mellon Foundation. It wasn't a big grant, it was a modest grant, but it was to pay for that project. So this gave us an opportunity to go, when I feel like when you put a big project together with lots of interesting pieces, you can go to lots of different kinds of funders for different pieces of what you're doing. It gives you the opportunity to have a conversation. Does that make sense? So it's almost like when you do a capital campaign for a building and you can get someone to underwrite this room and this space and the lobby and whatever. When your projects have multiple dimensions, you can get different funders for different dimensions. Now, I'm not arguing that every project is great just if it has lots of pieces. That was right for that project. That may not be right for your projects, but I want you to really dig in and think, what would make our project so interesting? What could be so mission-driven, so interesting, so wonderful, so engaging, that people are going to think about us differently at the Denver Children's Choir? And I believe that many of you have all the materials to do this. I just want you to it doesn't hurt, take an hour or two, and for once don't think about all the work on your desk. For once, just think about, why are you in this field? What is it you're trying to say? What project have you always wanted to do? Which artist have you always wanted to work with? What's something that would really give to your community in a wonderful way? And place that 3 years from now and work gradually towards it. Do it with one project to start, then add another one, then add another one, and over time you'll pivot your organization to the way you do your work. Yes, we'll go here and then we'll go here. We'll go in the back. Microphone back here. I'm sorry, I can't see your name. Samantha. Is it Samantha?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or Sam.
Sam.
I just was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the idea of cultivating donors who will be giving to the mission and to the general operating, as opposed to just project donors.
We love those.
Yes, including
Bloomberg
granting
Philanthropies.
organizations and foundations and stuff like that, as opposed
Yes.
to just our smaller individual donors.
We love when Bloomberg Philanthropies gives a gift and says it's not tied to a project. We love those. And we're going to have a whole session on fundraising. Okay, so we're going to get there in a few sessions. I'm going to go through the agenda in a moment. But for a lot of new donors, and I'm talking about new, bigger donors, you're not going to get GOS, General Operating Support, at the beginning anyway. They're going to get excited by a project. I find that's true the majority of the time. Not all the time, but the majority of the time. And so rather than fight that, I'm trying to do a project that could do the project I want to do, then look for the funding for that project. But there's one other piece for that, which is I always build in an overhead, if the foundation or the funder allows, that helps me pay for the rest of my organization to do that project. So if you get enough project funding, you're also getting a portion of GOS. Does that make sense? So some organizations let you do it, some organizations don't let you do it, but I try and do that. Then Susie had a question. Can we get the microphone over here?
So when you did your Sondheim project, and this is all about collaboration, how do you feel when you collaborated with the Lincoln Center? How do you feel about
I love collaboration.
Collaboration and what we do together?
I love collaboration, and one of the reasons for planning early is that it plans for big collaborations. One of my favorite Kennedy Center projects ever was a festival of the works of Shakespeare. I did this specifically to engage every arts organization in Washington that wanted to participate. That was the only rule. If you want to be in it, you're in it. You just have a project that related to Shakespeare. So we ended up with the plays of Shakespeare, of course, but symphonic music based on Shakespeare, jazz based on Shakespeare, operas, ballets, modern dances. One group did plays with little finger puppets. based on Shakespeare. 65 organizations participated. We acted, our only job was coordinating the dates, doing a website, doing one big brochure. Every group paid their own way, did their own thing. So many smaller organizations that never got an article in the Washington Post got an article in the Washington Post. The whole city went Shakespeare mad. So much so that we decided to open the festival with a reading of Twelfth Night on January 6th, which is Twelfth Night. And for a variety of reasons, we did it in our concert hall, but we thought we'd have like 300 people, so we roped off the whole thing. 7,200 people showed up for the reading of Twelfth Night, not one of the biggies, because it created such a buzz. We would love nothing more than for all of you to work together, or for some of you to work together, or to work with other educational institutions, or other arts institutions, or other government institutions. We love collaboration, but they take time, and they require a good contract. And I'm not saying that from a legal perspective. I'm saying that you want to make sure you're getting your fair share of the publicity, that you're very clear on who's going to pay, where there's overruns and all kinds of stuff. It has to be a good contract. It takes time. A good collaboration doesn't take 6 weeks. So you want to plan a couple of years out. I'll give an educational example. It goes back to Ailey. Ailey has a school. We educate dancers. We wanted our dancers to get college credits. There was a university across the street, Fordham University. They wanted their students to be able to take dance as part of their physical education requirement. So we made a deal. Their students came to our school, our students went to their school. It continues to this day. That relationship was formed in 1992, and it's continuing to now. It's a great collaboration. So yes, I totally believe in collaborations. And when you're a smaller organization, you have this big vision, and you say, I don't have the resources to do it myself. Well, who else does? Let's do it together. Does that make sense? But that takes time. You can't rush that. You don't want to rush it, because then the bigger organization always gets all the credit. And that's not what you want either. But you also want to be thought of, if you're smaller, and it's a smaller organization with a bigger organization, the smaller organization wants to be thought of in the company of the bigger organization, right? I worked with a little theater company in New York called the Acting Company. It's a wonderful company that tours plays around America, mostly for school groups. And they were formed out of a class from Juilliard, which, by the way, the original actors were Kevin Kline and Patti LuPone, so they weren't chopped liver. But it started as a bunch of kids. And it grew and it grew and it changed and it morphed over the years. And by the time I was working with them, they had hit some hard times. So what we did is we formed a relationship with Juilliard again, in which we said to Juilliard, your students can tour and get professional experience touring, which was great for Juilliard, and we got to be associated with Juilliard's acting program, one of the best in the world. So we really benefited, they really benefited, everyone was happy. So absolutely, but it takes time. It takes creativity. That's why I don't want you to think only about what's happening the next 6 months or 12 months, because a good collaboration almost always takes more than that. So plan something big. I can't do it myself. Who in the community could I do it with? Maybe it's commissioned work. Maybe you're a dance company and you want to commission a work with a local symphony. Whatever it is, yes. Or maybe it's 10 of you want to work together on the most amazing contemporary visual arts exhibition in the history of the city. Do it together. Plan it in advance. Make it really amazing. Don't rush it. Am I convincing anyone? I want to talk through now how all this fits into our program. And this program is really going to be about going around the cycle, essentially. The next class is going to be on October 29th. By the way, all of this is being mailed. A lot of it's in front of you. It's also being mailed to you. Like, don't take notes what I'm about to say now, because it's available to you. And that's going to be on marketing, the whole marketing area. Okay? Programmatic and institutional. Then we're going to have a special the third session, which is going to be in March or April of next year. We're going to get you all the dates very shortly. Is going to be specifically in social media, because it's such a helpful, important, inexpensive tool for reaching new people. So that'll be the third session. The fourth session, which is going to be next May and sometime next May, June-ish, is going to be on fundraising. A whole session just on fundraising. The session after that, which will be next, about a year from now, is going to be on building board productivity. How to make your boards as happy, productive, engaged, wonderful as they can be. And then the last session, which will be in the spring of 20, is going to be about strategic planning and about how do you implement all the things how do you implement your plan to make sure it gets implemented, okay? Those are the in-person sessions. I mentioned before there's also an online portal, and the online portal is going to have all the videos and other information that you can access that you say, what was that, or when is this, or who is that? So that's going to all be online and available to you. We will send you that information in the next couple of weeks. Then, one of the things we learned from the last group of AIM organizations is we gave too much homework, so we're reducing the amount of homework. Yay! There's only going to be 4 homework assignments in the whole 2 years, so it's not so bad. And the first is going to be exactly around this. We're going to ask you to create a longer-term artistic or programmatic plan, okay? By the way, when we say homework, there's no grading, it's not like that. It's just for your own good. It's just, we want you to start thinking about it, and we're going to ask you across the 2 years 4 times to do something. This first one's going to be this. And we hope you'll take it seriously, because I think you'll actually enjoy it as an organization to have a hard discussion over your artistic planning and what are we planning to do over these next few years, okay? After every session, we're going to ask you to evaluate that session. These are really important to us. We truly do change the program. This session is different than the last group we did because of the great comments we got from everyone. So we really want to hear your input. Very importantly, what I think differentiates this program from a lot of other capacity building programs is that every group is assigned a mentor. The mentors come from my organization. The mentors also come from other organizations. These are all experienced arts managers. They've all run arts organizations. And we assign the mentor to the group very carefully. You will get your mentors assigned to you in the next 3 weeks or so. But it's very important to us that we do this because they will have a monthly phone call with you so that if you have problems, if you have issues, if something's not clear, or if you're working on a project and you want some advice, these are like free consulting help for you, okay? But the idea is to make sure that as we talk about concepts, when we talk about fundraising, that you have someone to answer your questions, okay? You will form a bond, hopefully, with your mentor over a 2-year period, okay? These will be monthly phone calls, but also, again, we learned this from the last set, so this is a new addition. You will get 1 site visit from your mentor. You get to plan that site visit and when it is. Please don't say you want it in the next 3 weeks, because that's not the most helpful. Let this program unfold a little bit. Talk to the mentor a few times on the phone. Establish the relationship. I promise you'll get much more out of your site visit than if it's just sort of like, oh, hi, my name is Joe. That's not what the point of the site visit is. There's no evaluation being done. We do not go back to Bloomberg with any evaluation of anyone in this cohort. It's not that the site visits and the phone calls are not to judge you at all. It's purely supportive. Each mentor has their own style. I will be mentor for 2 Denver organizations. Brett will be mentoring some. We all mentor some, and we all do it in our own way. But it's totally non-evaluative, okay? It's really important to know. The only evaluative thing, and it's not evaluating you, it's evaluating the program, is there's something called the cycle audit. This is something you're going to hear about very shortly, and we're going to ask 3 individuals from each organization to fill out a questionnaire now meaning in the next month or so, and again at the end of the program. And we use this. Anita this morning gave some statistics. We use this to sort of learn what's working, what's not working, which messages are getting across, which are not, how have organizations changed because of the programs, how have they not. This is really, really important for us to make sure the work is going well. It's also really important so that we get to do these in other cities. Okay? So we've slimmed down the cycle audit to be not so horrible as it was last time. And so you'll all be asked, again, 3 people per organization will be asked to fill it in so that we get different perspectives. And then again at the end. None of this is going to be published saying, and this is what's happened with the Colorado Conservatory for the Jazz Arts, or this is what happened with Plataform. It's not like that. This is all added together and cumulative, if that makes sense. So this is just to figure out what's going on with the teaching. That's the program. Big pieces are in-person sessions, monthly phone calls, site visit. And those together, we find in our last 6 cities, really helped make change for a lot of organizations. So we're really excited to work with you on this. Are there questions about that? You're all okay? Okay, we're going to go take a picture. The picture is going to be outside, through these front doors, and around right where these curtains are, the other side. But let me, wait, don't go yet. Don't go yet. You can leave your stuff here, totally safe. Then we're having lunch, and everyone can have lunch. Lunch is going to be set up outside through this door. And for all the organizations that got an invitation, which are all the organizations, I think it's with 5 full-time equivalents or 4 or fewer, sorry, I'm meeting with one of each of you upstairs, and get your lunch. You know who you are. Get your lunch and come up the stairs, and we'll meet up there. Each time, you know, there'll be different configurations of who we're doing this with, but we wanted to make sure, particularly for the smallest organizations, that you're happy today. Okay? Are there any questions before we go take a picture and go into heat? All right. Thank you all very, very much for your participation tonight. Thank you.